From the Asgard Company Studios in beautiful Wichita Falls, Texas, from the finest mind in the modern fitness industry, the one true voice in the strength and conditioning profession, the most important podcast on the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, Starting Strength Radio.
Welcome back to Starting Strength Radio. It's Friday, and so are they. We are here with our panel. We're going to revisit the COVID-19 discussion that we started several weeks ago. We are here with Dr. Andrew Mueller and Dr. Stef Bradford, and we are going to talk today about some of the things that have developed over the past several weeks in light of new information. And as we all had previously surmised, this thing is completely different a situation than it was presented. Mm-hmm. So let's give that a shot. As I see it, we've got two separate things to talk about today. We have to talk about the disease, COVID-19, and that is far, far less interesting to me and most other people that are thinking about this than the response to the disease. So we're going to talk first about the disease itself. Andrew, Steph, thanks for being here today. Mm-hmm. What do you guys, what the hell is going on with this virus? Because my perception is not a hell of a lot.
Right. I feel like we still don't have great data. We don't have any of the data. We don't have the answers we want, but all the data that's becoming available just continues to paint a picture that this is not anywhere close to our worst case scenario. No. It's not what we feared. And it's probably better than a lot of the best case scenarios presented. Yeah. Just a few weeks ago when we talked about this.
Right. It's fallen incredibly short of the hopes. Some people seem to have hopes that it would be, the death plague, and
yes. Right.
And they seem pretty disappointed. They keep moving the goalposts on it, and they keep having to move them further.
Yep. I mean, it is as if lots and lots of people wanted piles of bodies.
And they wanted the fatality rate to be high, and it seems like...
And it's not happening anywhere except New York City. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that it's happening in New York City because everything you're told by the media is a bald-faced lie. 100% of it is wrong in some material aspect. I guess this belongs in subject number 2, but we don't know anything about this disease because we're not being told the truth about it at any turn.
Well, yeah, there's amazing problems with all the the data,
right?
And then you have the interpretation of it, and it's very uneven, and there's questions about all the information you're getting in. And much of it's been challenged by people who are actually on the ground versus how it goes up the chains and the bureaucracies and how it's reformulated and repackaged, and then of course it goes to the media itself, which is trying to sell a story. They're trying to make a movie here. That's what it looks like.
Well, we talked about it a few weeks ago. We talked about all the problems with the data, and one of the things that we said was we have no idea how many people have really been exposed, so we don't really know what the fatality rate is. And I really wish we had a better answer to that, but in New York, just in the last couple weeks, they tested thousands of random people, and it turns out a very large percentage had been exposed, and therefore you could deduce that the fatality rate is quite possibly 50 times lower than we thought.
Right, there's been various populations they've tested in that way. Some a little better, some worse, as far as whether.
Yeah, there are problems with some of the data and all of the conventional wisdom.
And there's still problems with the tests. The tests have very high false positive rates.
Right.
There's problems with contamination. There's problems with every bit of the equipment we're using, and complicates things. It complicates things.
And the fans of the disease are quick to point out that there are problems with all of these antibody tests. Somebody didn't like one of the statistical mechanisms used to tally things up, so they'll say, that study's bullshit. The various problems with the picky details and stuff. But
But at the end,
But in the end, every one of these tests, these antibody tests, is showing the same damn thing. The infection rate is incredibly higher than it was predicted to be, bringing the case fatality rate way, 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 way down.
And yeah, and then even when we go, and we'll talk about people's reactions and stuff. And it's not surprising. The government's normally behind. They're 20 steps behind, which is usually the problem when they try to make a solution that they misinterpret everything. From how prevalent it is in the population, you start having to question how long it's been out there, and did everything they tried to do come too late? That's sure what it looks like, because the decreases that we've seen don't time out to what you'd expect.
Well, what it looks like happened. I've seen a lot of articles and opinions about this. It looks as though the disease actually got here back in November. And I've seen several people write about a big spike in influenza-like illness back before New Year's. And then a second spike, which was then attributed to COVID-19 after a test for that particular virus became available. And what it looks like in California and several other places is that this disease ran through the population, built up quite a bit of immunity before the sickness was attributed to COVID-19. And that's one of the reasons why the actual case fatality rate or the infection fatality rate is so damn low. Because lots and lots of people had been exposed to this before they were aware that it was a thing.
right.
So the numbers are bad. I mean, just once again.
The numbers are bad. And then we shut down the whole country for the last, how long now? How long have we been shut down?
Well,
about 2.5 months.
Yeah, it depends how you count it. And then, obviously there's been some variation in how shut down things have been.
Well, in a fit of dissatisfaction with the numbers we were getting, I formulated a brand new statistic of my own that I'm calling the RDC-19, the rate of death from COVID-19. And what I've done here is a simple little bit of division. I have taken within a jurisdiction the number of deaths, which are the only thing that matters. Dead people are the only thing that matters. We know dead people. There he is. He's dead, right? Now, if you want to tell us he died from COVID when he actually OD'd on heroin, that's fine. You can go ahead and do that. But even then, the statistic holds as an indicator of the actual magnitude of this problem. For example, in the world, the whole planet, the death rate, in other words, the number of people who have died of what has been attributed to COVID-19 divided by the population of the earth, that rate is 0.003402%. 0.003402%. In the United States, the death rate is 0.02832. Now, that's skewed upward because of the New York City data, which we'll talk about in a minute. California has been in the process of going completely apeshit for the past couple of months now. The actual death rate in the state of California is 0.00524%. In Orange County, talking to Ray about this the other day, in Orange County, the death rate is 0.00178%. And their brilliant Governor Gavin Newsom, what is he trying to compete with Pol Pot? You know, when do the executions start? Is what I'd like to know.
Well, first you drag them to the camps. So
you got to get them in the camps first.
Identify, you do your contact tracing, you drag them to the camps.
The Ventura County guy wanted us to be dragged out of
And
the
then you
house
just
and put in camps, right?
Take them down.
Didn't you send me something like that, Nick? What's his situation? Got a doctor in Ventura County actually let slip that they're going to take people out of the houses that test positive.
He's some kind of health director, and he said
some kind of bureaucrat. He's an unelected bureaucrat.
If during the contact tracing they find that
during contact tracing they find that
you're not able to isolate in your house, meaning that you only have one bathroom,
right,
and everybody else has to use that bathroom. He said those people aren't going to be
given facilities.
He said his specific
given their
words
own
were,
different
we're
facilities.
We're not going to be able to keep those people in their houses, and we'll come and take them and put them in facilities that we've set up.
In Ventura County,
So that makes you want to get tested, right?
If you are,
Yeah.
if
Yeah,
you're
I don't think so.
symptomatic,
It goes on.
they're going to take you out of the house and put you somewhere in a facility, someplace in a facility that they've constructed for you.
But it's
Okay,
expanded,
now
it's expanded to all your contacts too.
Do your contacts? Oh, this is, you know.
Yeah,
So this is part two.
They have
This is
tests,
part two.
tests
stuff.
that don't work very well.
Tests that don't work.
False positives.
Yeah.
We'll just leave it
Sensitivity
there.
in the
Nonetheless,
60%
they are
Yeah.
going to proceed on the assumption that everything is working just fine and take you out of the house. And what happens if you don't want to go?
Right.
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
Well, they tried to throw the salon owner in Dallas in jail, right?
Yep.
I think that got overturned.
Oh, they
but
did
7
throw her in
days.
jail.
Yeah. That got overturned, I think. But yeah,
it was
7 days.
the Texas Supreme Court decided that was a bad idea and to get her the fuck out of there. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. From what I understand, we're filming this on a Thursday afternoon on May the because it's going to air at a different date.
And you saw what
This is May the 7th.
May 7th.
Yeah.
Yep.
May the 7th, they released her from jail this afternoon.
Yep.
Did you see
And-
Abbott's statements as well? That
No, what did he say?
they made any kind of jail time as a result of the executive orders to be null and void and retroactive all the way through the start of April. So at any time where you could have been jailed, they
Right.
said, no, you can't be jailed for this.
Well,
You
that's
can't be
sweet
jailed.
of him.
Good. Yeah.
It shouldn't have been there in the first
It
place.
shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Right.
ridiculous
That was
they
a
didn't
that
make
was
that
a
statement.
that was a
Should have been
ridiculous
there in the first
overreach,
place.
and they should have anticipated that
And-
that was not going to hold up.
Right.
He should have
Because it was
pardoned her
clearly-
yesterday afternoon, and he didn't do it. Later, all right. Anyway, so here are these numbers. Wichita County, for example, our little town right here, wonderful little Wichita County here in the middle of nowhere in North Texas. We've had like 2 deaths. Mm-hmm. It has been about a week since we had a new case here in Wichita County. About a week. Our RDC 19 is 0.00152%. Yet 25-year-old kids are wandering around the sidewalks wearing masks.
And
You know,
there's no. I haven't seen any compelling evidence that it's because we sheltered in place in
No.
Wichita Falls. That's not why that number's so
No,
low.
and all the
There-
all the
there's
And we
numbers,
haven't sheltered in place.
all the numbers of things
We were
slowing down
ordered
have been the events the results that we've seen have been too early for the lockdowns to have been contributors to that.
Yeah,
Right.
So
exactly.
If you walked out
very interesting.
on Kemp Street Monday afternoon, the main drag right through Wichita Falls here, traffic was normal. It was absolutely normal. It doesn't look like anything's going on here in Wichita Falls. In other words, we didn't pay attention to their stupid ass lockdown.
yeah, we got an F.
And we've still we got an F
for
in social distancing.
They mean physical distancing, but they keep using
They
this
keep
term.
using this term
Social.
that sounds so cool to them.
It sounds like you're trying to make people swallow an obvious
Yeah, if you
term.
if you control the language, you control the thinking.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Goebbels knew that quite well. Anyway, I don't see how any statistic other than this one right here makes any difference. How many people are dead? How many people do you have? And how many of them have died of this disease? Now, we're worried about people dying, right? Well, that tells you what you need to know. And nothing else is important. Not case fatality rate, not infection fatality rate. Those are all interesting. Those are interesting from an epidemiology standpoint. But from a public policy standpoint. The only thing that matters is how many people have died because of this disease. And the corollary to that is, what have your draconian, totalitarian, tyrannical policies done to keep that number down? Right? I don't see another analysis.
What are you saying with the last point? Are you saying what has shelter in
What
place
has
done?
shelter in place?
Yeah,
what
show
has
the
house
evidence. Show
arrest
the, right.
done
Yeah.
to keep us
Yeah.
from dying?
And I don't.
We
You know
got
what's interesting? I'm going to take a little step back here. Is we were talking about the language just briefly. Shelter in place. Where did that term get trial ballooned? Where did it get used over and over?
mass shootings,
With what they call active shooter.
active shooters,
You know,
shelter
all
in
these
place.
terms that are used over and over, and
What-
so they're trying to
active-
equate. They're trying to equate in people's mind the idea that you have to hide behind barrier, hide
Right.
in your house,
Right.
as if there's somebody out there with an
Shelter in
an
place.
assault weapon.
Shelter in place means
trying to show
cower
you.
in
It
fear.
means cower in fear.
Cower in fear.
But even so, there's a difference between somebody walking down this hallway, shooting at you, and you can't invisible enemy. You can't see. That's not in the area. That doesn't make sense with the transmission. Doesn't make sense with the numbers, and you need to stay inside and shelter in place, just lock down.
Right.
All these terms have been shifted over from a much more acute situation of risk to a much more diffuse one over a long period for a long period of time, and that's an interesting thing because it's really obvious if you look at it that that's what's been borrowed from. Like, we set up this situation, we did it over and over and over and over from these isolated examples that have their own bits of narrative reporting that make them out to be something different than what they actually are, and then we've taken those terms and we just locked them into an entirely new situation. And that should have made everyone be on guard.
It should have been.
Instead
Yes,
of ready to roll along with it.
Right.
But what we found is that that primed a lot of people to just swallow it whole.
The only way any of this makes any sense, any of this bizarre treatment of this disease as the plague. I mean, where fleas jumped from rats and killed the quarter of the population of the planet. That was what, 1300s?
Sounds right.
So this only makes sense if you look at the case of New York City. All right, the pneumonic plague back in the 1300s killed a gigantic percentage of the population of people on Earth, and I mean 20-25% of the people on Earth were killed by this disease. Now, this is back before we knew anything at all about what diseases were, what the vectors were, anything about it. We have a whole bunch of hysterical epidemiology bureaucrats running around trying to make themselves relevant, trying to prop up their own position within the infrastructure of bureaucracy, spouting big, gigantic numbers that aren't actually even close to pneumonic plague numbers from the 1300s. The only place in the United States that's even approached what they said it was going to be, and it falls far short of where it was going to be, was New York City. All right, New York City is a special case. It is an outlier. However, all of the media networks are located in New York City, and as has been the case for decades, the only thing that matters to the media is what happens in New York City. We've all seen this on TV. You know all of the names of the streets in downtown Manhattan, don't you? From having had this shit pumped into you on television all your life. And I hate to say this, but the rest of the country is not New York City. I know New York City doesn't like to hear that, but the rest of the country is not New York City. And New York City is not typical. New York City is an outlier. And that worst case scenario did not even come to pass in New York City. The rest of the country did not experience, and has not experienced, that is not going to experience, the COVID-19 pandemic the way New York City did, because the rest of the country, believe it or not, doesn't experience anything the way New York City does, because New York City is not typical of the rest of the United States. Okay? God damn, I hate to say this, but, you know, you people in New York City, we're not terribly concerned with you.
Well,
you know how you're not concerned with us? You know how you feel about flyover country. You know how you feel about the rest of the country. You know how New York City feels about Nebraska and Texas. Well, Nebraska and Texas feels that way about you too. Okay, and we're all real sorry, but we're not having the same kind of an event that you guys are. But our governments are reacting to it as if we are.
Well, and see, this is the thing. I mean, there's nothing unusual or surprising about networks located in New York City or people living there having the view of their local environment. I mean, and New York City is the most parochial and insular place I've ever been in my life. They just don't realize it. But that's natural. Okay? Now, but what you're seeing that's a problem is extrapolating that everywhere else. That's a problem.
Yes.
Just like it is from any kind of scientific data set that might, I mean, and of course the data varies. Data very well be very bad. But even if it's good, that doesn't mean you can extrapolate it everywhere else because it's not the same situation. And unfortunately, bureaucracies and the media extrapolate everything to push a narrative. And again, that's what bureaucracies do. They're aligned to the interests that are local to bureaucracy. A big mistake is that people assume that they're not. And no, they don't just have this benevolent effect where they're able to put aside their own personal biases and whether or not their department gets more money or whether they personally get advanced or whether they get attention or whatever else it is. It's like everyone has their own local interests. And when you start extrapolating it, you're going to start extrapolating and magnifying the errors because it's not based on the specific situation.
And I think what you're saying, that's one of the things that's been surprising to me through all this, and I think we should explore. One of the things that's been surprising to me through this, and I think we should explore, is I honestly was surprised when Wichita Falls sheltered in place. And it'd be interesting to go back and look at how did that happen. It wasn't just a media narrative. There were lots of people involved. I mean, that was maybe that was the driving force. But there were politicians that were involved in that decision that are not part of the media. There were healthcare workers that were involved in influencing that decision. And so we had multiple people coming together, influenced largely by a narrative, making decisions that in hindsight are difficult to justify why we sheltered in place in Wichita Falls. I'd be interested to hear
why
the
they ordered it, because we didn't really do
it.
it.
I mean, we didn't do it right. Yeah. But I mean, why that was ordered, it's something I've been reflecting on. I mean, because I want to learn from this from the future. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. I mean, this was the first crisis of my lifetime that I was an adult, because I'm younger than the other two people at this table.
There's never been a crisis like this in any living person's lifetime. Nothing even
in what sense? Oh yeah, nothing that compares.
Well,
nothing that compares
and when you saw
from an economic and social sense.
But
nothing.
I've never, since I grew up in a generation that didn't go through World War II, wasn't aware of Vietnam, even if part of my generation
this is
was
far
born.
in excess of anything that occurred in Vietnam, or for that matter, World War II.
But I would
during
assume,
World War II, you could still go get lunch.
Right.
You know,
I get my point that I'm trying to get at though is, I think the people who lived through that got to see how human beings react in a panic, or how they, maybe we don't even call World War II a panic, but it's just through extreme circumstances, how human beings bond together, and the good and the bad of that. And so this event has been surprising to me to see how easily people give up their rights, how easily political decisions are made that have huge ramifications on people's businesses and economic lives and health that are based on bad data.
Well, and they knew the data wasn't good.
Inaccurate model.
They knew the data wasn't good,
Well,
and they knew there were.
But let's be careful.
And
I don't believe
I'm
that
not saying that we're. What I'm saying is they knew there were problems with all.
Who's they?
The people that you're talking about as being policymakers.
I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know that the people in Wichita Falls knew that the data was bad. I mean, there was one of my biggest regrets.
Wait. Okay, let me say. When I say the data's bad, I'm not talking about data being bad in the sense that it's false data and we're doing false data. Anybody who's not a complete idiot, and there's plenty of idiots, especially in Wichita Falls government, there's no doubt.
Lots and lots.
that the data was very incomplete and had a lot of problems with it because it was incomplete, whether we're starting with information we're getting from China or from other places where clearly things were different. Anybody who's not a complete idiot could understand that it was very incomplete, it was very partial data, and they were worried and they heard these models. And you have a lot of people there, they don't understand, and it seems odd to me because it seems pretty obvious that if you make a model built on assumptions where the assumptions just going a little bit one direction or another are going to vastly change the outcome, and you know your stuff's not very reliable because you only have a small piece of information, you know there's problems with it, you know the population hasn't been tested, you know whatever else you're looking at, you don't know about, it's a new disease, we don't know anything about it, right? And yet you jump to this. So when I say they're reacting on bad data is like there should have been some caution.
Right.
Caution based on knowing that your information was weak.
Right, but and I guess I think I misunderstood you when you were saying they knew it was bad data. It almost made me think you were saying it was malignant. I don't think it was that at all. I think it was fear. It was out of fear.
It was never attribute to malice that which is adequately explained by stupidity.
But when people keep doing it over and over, you have to assume they're not stupid and they're willfully doing it.
For example, they're looking this far in front of them.
Right.
This far in front of them. One of the local idiots last week actually said, you know, as a result of all of this, we're going to have problems with our sales tax revenue. How are we going to?
They just realized that.
No shit.
They just realized that. They just realized that.
You guys are going to have problems paying for things because nobody spent any money and you didn't collect any sales tax and you didn't realize that was a variable that needed to be calculated into this deal.
Yeah, that was getting
what the hell are you?
Way too little factor into the
but when you talk about what's different than decades ago, well, the education level of the population is much worse in the sense of being actually educated. I mean, we're all run through schools, but the schools are crap. Okay, so the education level is less, and there's been more and more influence of media, and he was just talking about having hand in front of the face,
short-sighted.
Distractibility. People not paying attention, just getting little things shoved in front of them, having to react right then, and not having long-term follow-up of those things. How many times have you heard a news story? It could be about anything. You know, maybe someone got kidnapped or whatever. It's the biggest, most important event ever that day. A week later, if you think about it, you're like, what happened to that?
Right.
What happened to that invasion over here, or people dying? Was there a famine in there in Somalia this past year?
Yeah.
And it just disappears.
So, Steph, you're making the point. I'm glad you said it because you're making the point I wanted to make, which was, I don't read Plato. I'm not going to sit here and sound like a pompous ass who sits around Plato. But I saw a quote of Plato on the wall. It was a little like bumper sticker, and it said, "The punishment of wise men who refuse to participate in their government is to be ruled by unwise men." And that's one of my takeaways. Like when I'm sitting here thinking, don't let a good crisis go to waste. How do we learn from this? How do we prepare for the future? Holy shit! How are we not more involved?
You have all those problems with like lack of education and build up, along with the establishment over decades of an administrative bureaucracy that controls things, right? So you set up the fundamental surveillance state that we're just starting to get more and more technology taking over that, and some people are pushing that pretty hard right now. They think you all need to have, you need to have your mandatory, vaccinations and your real ID, and we track you forever, and we check you and follow you and contact trace you and all those things. Well, the structure of that has been built.
We've given you one of these.
The structure.
And this thing might as well be a microchip.
Yeah, the structure for that's not quite attached to you yet. That's what they want to go to next. But the structure for that is the bureaucracies, the CDC, the FDA that have controlled all these things and made it so you are just trapped by multiple strings that control every single thing you do or how you can react. I mean, why do you get, we're dumping dairy, we're killing these hogs or whatever. It's like, right, because you can't switch on a dime. You have logistical problems, there's that. But regulatory-wise, you don't get a free pass from the regulations if you can't just hand out milk to people, right? So you just got to pour it on the ground. You can't even feed the pigs over there. We're just going to kill the pigs instead, right? Yeah. So that's
kill
been
the
built
pigs,
up
push them in a hole.
over a very long time, in creating a system of control and surveillance has been implemented into not just our country, but countries worldwide. We can sit here, and it's very easy to look at China and talk about their social control and, they're just ants and this or that, whatever you want to say. But pay attention to what's gone on here. It's different in some of the implementation, but that's what the same kind of things you've seen with people just giving up their control, giving up their decisions, to other people, and there's consequences for that.
Right. We have
Absolutely.
Right. That's my takeaway. We have to have more thoughtful leadership, more wise people.
Well, I mean, you're saying leadership. I'm saying that structurally the problem is trying to control everybody's behavior. The regulatory state is what sets you up for this.
Well, that's the
desire for
regulatory
control.
state I live
That's
in. I'm not ready to lead a
is-
revolution. So
well,
my option
what I'm
is to
saying
get
is when you look at it structurally, it's already predisposed to this control and structurally predisposed to that increasing over time, not decreasing.
Well, what Stef is saying is that bureaucratic momentum precludes wise leadership.
Right. Absolutely.
Just to cut through the bullshit.
Fair enough.
Why have they been trying to get rid of Donald Trump for 3.5 years? Because he's not in the club. The man is not Lucifer, and he has been portrayed as Lucifer. And the reason he's been portrayed as Lucifer is because he's not one of the Bushes. He was not raised to be in politics like every other U.S. president for the past several decades has been a member of the club. So what you're advocating is that we put good men in positions of leadership. And what she is saying, and if you'll think about it a minute, what is probably true is that the bureaucracy doesn't want good men in positions of leadership.
Don't disagree with that at all.
They want
They're men.
tools.
But in Wichita Falls, Texas,
Here locally.
I regret not showing up at the city council meeting.
This is a very
Well, they
good
weren't.
point.
The council meeting,
Most
though,
of the-
that was just a show.
Most
They're
of
not
the
there
eff-
to get opinions.
Most of the adverse effects of what has happened to society in the United States as a result of this idiotic power play have happened at the state, county, and local level.
Correct. And that's what I'm getting at.
The federal
we can
government has
influence
been,
that.
probably because of Donald Trump, has been pretty damn good at staying out of the way. They've finally followed the 10th Amendment, right? But Donald Trump didn't put me on lockdown. Donald Trump didn't close my business. Donald Trump didn't fix it up so I can't go eat lunch. You know?
Right.
Who was that? These simpletons who are just following the leader. They're playing the leadership game
Right.
as they see it to be played.
And I'm just saying we
Right.
can still have wise men who step up into those roles and make it.
At the
and wise
local
men and
level,
women,
you're
right,
absolutely
men
right.
and women.
You have probably got a better chance of affecting the outcome of this thing at the local level than you do at the national level. Right. But the problem trickles down from the top, as all things do. But I'll tell you my perception of the bigger problem is that people are willing to be told what to do.
And this is the thing right here. When you talk about
this is
local,
shocking.
what's the ultimate local? What you do. I mean, you can talk about the government, as if they have an actual right to control you. If you walk outside and you open your business, like Rip's business has been open and they've just been ignoring it because they don't want to challenge him because they know that's not going to go well for them. But it's like if you go outside of your house and you open your business and you go down the street and you talk to your neighbors, that you can do. We don't have to talk about who you can elect in some other position that you can follow. What are you doing? Every
Right.
single person is making decisions, and that mass is actually very powerful.
Yes.
And if the mass is cowering and they're afraid and I might get in trouble or I might get sick or maybe it'll be my fault somebody else gets sick. No,
Right.
viruses aren't your fault.
Tell us the story about our friends in Colorado.
Well, I was recently up in Colorado checking on some things there, and on my way back to Texas, I ran into one of the guys we know up there. And he had actually three stories, but two stories to relate about what he personally had experienced. Now, in the county where he is, it's very sparsely populated. They've had 3 total cases. 3. 1, 2, 3. 3. Okay. Everyone's outdoors. It's nothing but UV. Well,
High altitude, bad place for virus.
yeah, you can just see things, bacteria die, in seconds out there. So his wife went back home, and one of their daughters didn't want her to come in the house. Didn't want her to come in to their house And
on the
she had to-
highway all afternoon.
had
They
be-
get to
had to be.
This is in the Midwest. They get
one
to
of the
house.
one of the other people in the let her in so she could use the facilities, and boy, that was not good.
Mm-hmm.
The daughter was upset about because that had been violated there.
The
So she's
daughter
so
was
afraid.
upset because her mother had been let in her house.
Her mother, who's living in a place where it's just all it's there's no one there, nobody's sick,
This
drove
is
straight
the
through.
extent to which the media have done their
Has
job.
influenced behavior into
And that's just-
totally
that's-
illogical.
That's just
And do we? And that's
It's
just
hysterical.
And that's
It's
a great
hysterical.
story to ask the question: is this how we want to live our lives? Like how long? I mean, do we never want to shake hands
I'll tell
again?
you, I don't want to talk to somebody that acts like that. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to be friends with them. I don't want to do business with them because I don't consider them somebody worthy of interaction with me. Somebody that's that afraid is mentally ill. That's mental illness. Now, hopefully, it's temporary for that person.
I think it's
but
more
mental-
correctly termed mental weakness.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a weak intellect and a weak character.
and
is
been
what it is.
misled. That's been misled.
That's
Yeah.
been
That's
misled.
given
That's
bad
had, that's had
information.
weakness encouraged.
Yeah.
That really is the case, isn't it? They've had their weaknesses encouraged by the media, who have done their propaganda job.
Well, to invert virtue for cowardice.
Yes.
Right? So cowardice used to be something you avoid, right? It's considered a bad thing, and now it's almost elevated to a
Do you want
special
to explain that anymore? The inversion of
inversion.
No, I know that, but the inversion of virtue and cowardice. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I mean, in virtue of the things we consider not virtuous with virtuous. Just there's so many examples of that. Just overall, instead of
Cowering in
there's-
fear is
there's-
virtuous
There's
now.
things that we used to consider virtues that people would try. You try to be courageous. Strength is valued. All these things that are good have been
Beowulf,
turned.
all that shit.
Have
Well,
been
is
turned
it- is
into
it-
have
is
been
it-
turned into like elevating. Oh, it's better to be a coward. It's better to be a victim.
Yeah.
No, it's not better to be a
Is
coward.
it Bill Arnett, or who's that really famous historian who's very good? Do you know what I'm talking about? He says that exact thing in his. He writes after he wrote this like 11 or 13 volume of humanity that's well acclaimed. He just a tiny little book that I read. That's sick. That's just a summary of everything he learned. And he
Right.
said all human virtue used to be, all human vices were once upon a time a virtue. So absolutely saying what you're saying. So as we go forward in the future, because that's all we have, all we have is this moment and going forward, what are the positive things that we can, and they're not really positive, but what can we learn from this and be better prepared? This will happen again. Not necessarily Corona and a pandemic, but hard times, extreme
the same
events.
kind of thing.
and-
We're going to be entering them thanks to the economic consequences.
Absolutely.
of these things.
And we've
but
learned
here's the
crazy
thing
things
is,
like-
people need to ask themselves, do you have a line where you'll stop when someone's pushing you? Is it going to stop? Now, I think some people what's going
That's
to
a line
happen.
we need to
How
Some
far
people
will you go? Did you
there's-
see my little video we
there's-
did with Chase the other day?
No.
Oh, you ought to look that up.
Okay.
I handed Chase a plate of dog shit, and I said, Chase, here is a plate of dog shit. The city government has determined that dog shit is protective against the coronavirus. So here's a plate of dog shit. Would you like a fork or a spoon? And he said, I'm not going to eat that. I said, but it's protective against coronavirus. He said, I don't care. I'm not going to eat that. I said, so Chase, you mean there's something you won't do that the government tells you to do? He said, I'm not going to eat it. I said, this is an interesting development.
Right. Well, and
But,
that's-
here's
no.
that we have proven beyond any doubt whatsoever that we will roll over on our backs if we are sufficiently afraid, and we will
But
do what we are
now,
told.
the time to answer that question too.
Somewhat though, because also people will go along with it and then they go, oh shit, I shouldn't have, and then
Which is
decide
what-
where they're gonna
right.
like next time I'm gonna stop here.
And
Or
that's,
no,
and
you have to
that's
have
why
your
it's so
proof there.
important. We have to answer those questions for ourselves when we're not
Ahead
the
of time.
The time to answer that question about how much am I willing to take is not in the middle of a pandemic
No.
or a crisis. It's
It is.
in moments of peace
And-
to be reflective and
so
to be prepared.
in the coming weeks, everybody calms the fuck down.
Yep.
Everybody has to be aware of two things. First, this is going to happen again.
Right.
We have given them a useful tool. We have told them exactly how far we will back up.
Right, we failed the test.
We failed the test. We were tested and we failed
Across
the
the
test. The whole world failed the test. The whole world is now ripe for doing this again and taking it as far as they want it to go. So thing number 2 is we have to decide what our response is going to be the next time, because there will be a next time. If you don't think there's not a next time, you are a fucking moron. All right? You're a fucking moron. There is a new disease comes around every couple of years. Or at this point, anything they want to fabricate is a threat. If you're sufficiently scared, you have just demonstrated that you will lay down on your back and show them your belly. Are you going to do it again? Because this time they might gut you. Since they got your belly, they may gut you. What are you going to do? What the hell are you going to do? You need to think about this now.
So
right?
Yeah. Well, another
I mean,
thing
what
too,
Andrew is saying is absolutely true. How do we make plans for this to not be done?
How do we have essential drugs that are not manufactured in the United States, that are only manufactured in China? I mean, things that like we all sort of knew, and this just brought it to the limelight. Like it's insanity.
Right.
We have essential drugs that are not manufactured in the United States anywhere.
I didn't know that China manufactured 98% of our antibiotics. I had no idea.
Never had time to worry about it.
The World Trade Organization fixed that all up for us.
Yeah.
Maybe this would be a good time to get out of the World Trade Organization.
Well, and a lot of those things. I mean, obviously, again, you have conditions that are put in place in one area that make it so you can't compete, and so you move your factories. I mean, this is duh. But I mean, it's dumb.
Right. It was to save costs. But how much money are we? As we have, what did we print? $3 trillion with the CARES Act. Was it a $3 trillion package? 1.8.
Oh,
it's a staggering amount of money.
It doesn't matter.
I think that was more than the $20 or whatever we saved.
It was allowed to happen. It was allowed to happen because these things were regulated out of profitability, okay? And that just doesn't make a lot of sense. But remember, the incentives that may be at a bureaucracy are not your incentives. They're not the country's incentives. Yep. People are looking, out for themselves. That's just how people are, But the other thing to look at, too, is, guys, what's happened with information? I mean, have you seen how the big social media companies have censored things? They pulled things down off YouTube if they don't agree with the WHO, we're going to take them down. Okay.
How's that? I haven't looked at that. Has that taken it? Because I mean, there's been talk of that over the last couple of years of how they're doing that. Has that gone to a new level?
Yeah, absolutely. They've upfront. Okay, they've always done this. I mean, come on, they're completely politically motivated. Their funding is not entirely, from people. We know how governments fund all these things, but so you have these sides that are controlling, that are powerful influences, and you'll see different groups pulled out and penalized, or different ideas pulled out and penalized. So pushing back on some of these things, YouTube just outright said, if it goes against what the World Health Organization says, it's off.
Wow.
And they pulled stuff. And this is Facebook's is pulling stuff. They'll flag, things. Twitter has a new tool that's coming in where before you post, they'll tell you, you sure you want to post that? That looks like it might be not the kind of thing you want to post.
The giving up of our freedom of speech is the scariest thing happening in this country right now to me. But
yes,
and I mean that is the scariest thing that's happening.
It is. Yeah, it is. In fact, because where does speech take place in 2020? Social media.
On the internet, yeah.
Social media on the internet.
Yep.
And you got private companies, like it or not. Facebook's a private company. They can do what the fuck they want to do. Yep. Fine with me. It's my fault if I get dependent on them, though.
Right.
That would be a problem that I haven't thought about hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If I am dependent on the goodwill of Twitter to be able to communicate my ideas, then I'm not thinking very clearly.
Just like we're dependent on the goodwill of Chinese manufacturers to provide us with essential drugs.
Yeah.
Similar to that kind of
liability.
Maybe we should think about that.
Same kind of exposure.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. So I thought about being prepared on the drug wise, being prepared with good leadership. I mean, there's so many different ways that we need to be prepared for this in the future. Have to ask you, Rip. Physiologically, and I think we may have talked about physiologic reserve a little bit last time on the podcast, but just to, if not, when you're young, physiologic reserve, really simple concept. The kidneys are the most obvious. After the age of 40, you lose 1% of their function per year. But like with your lungs, when I work out, maybe I only use, even if I work out hard, maybe I use 60, 70% of my lung capacity. But at a normal level, it's even much lower. As we get older, we're at an older person maybe just walk up the stairs, they're using 100%. They get any sort of stress, whether it be the coronavirus or something, and suddenly they need to be on a ventilator. They can't maintain their functions because they have no reserve. How does that fit in? How does barbell and strength training? We haven't talked about that at all in the previous podcast or this one. How does that physiologic reserve concept fit in with coronavirus and barbells and strength training?
Well, a lot of people have observed that strength training is like money in the bank. Is like building a cash reserve, over and above what you need right now. In the event of future drains on those reserves, some idiot on the board a couple of weeks ago made the bizarre observation that Rippetoe, you can't squat your way out of COVID-19. Actually said that. Look, dumb fuck. No one said you can squat your way out of COVID-19. That's a virus, okay? But who gets through a viral infection better? A 235-pound semi-fat guy with a whole bunch of muscle that's 64? Or a 145-pound skinny guy with no muscle that's 64? Well, I know who I want to be, okay? Because I got sick. I'm convinced I had this. I don't think that there are any data that suggest that the general population is at risk of death from COVID-19.
Healthy people under the age of 60, this is not a significant risk factor for death
of COVID-19.
Riding a motorcycle is still scarier than coronavirus, unfortunately.
And bathroom accidents more common.
In New York City, 50% of the people who have died in New York City were nursing home residents over the age of 70.
Yeah.
It's quite clear. The data is quite clear. Even the shitty data is quite clear about who dies from this. And as a result of not looking carefully at that data, we have made public policy that puts our culture in jeopardy.
It does.
Well,
that's a good summary.
And that's not an exaggeration. We have put our way of life, the American way of life, at risk.
Yes.
By the way that we have handled this. And I know there were a lot of people who thought they were doing it because they thought the virus was going to put our way of life at risk, and it's turning out the data says that's probably not the case.
But
our decisions have put our way of life.
But the whole time we've known that it was vulnerable populations, the very elderly and people that had other compromises. That wasn't the narrative.
If you remember, though, there was a good week or so in the media where that was
everybody
not the
was going to die.
The whole focus was on every healthy person that they could in any way call a coronavirus.
The media would put that in, but the numbers that were getting in from Italy and whatever, those numbers were
it was never supported by data, but anecdotally.
But they were pulling out those numbers. They were pulling out those numbers. That was there the whole time. Maybe if you just looked at some of the most mainstream stuff, you didn't see it, but that information was out there.
You had stellar intellects like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who did this same shit back in the late 80s by telling everyone who would listen to him, and a lot of people listened, that AIDS was going to be in the general population, that there were going to be tens of millions of dead people by 1992.
Yeah, he does have that history.
He has a history of being utterly wrong, and yet he keeps his fucking job. If you and I were as bad at our job as Dr. Anthony fucking Fauci, we would be homeless living in a fucking trash can. That's exactly where we'd be. Right? And yet this motherfucker still has a job with the federal government.
And the homeless people are doing pretty good as far as their... we haven't seen the homeless population drop dead, have we?
Fascinatingly enough,
they've been
because they live outside.
It does
Outside's a bad place for the virus. as it turns out, unless you live in Chicago and you can't go outside.
I think even the homeless people get to go outside in Chicago.
In Chicago, if you're homeless.
The rules don't apply evenly.
No,
they want to enforce them on
very uneven.
The sheep population is the easy place to enforce your rules, not on the edges. That's always the case.
Right.
They're gonna come for you first because you might pay the fine.
In fact, you might. Well, I don't know, Andrew, Steph. I don't know. We have placed ourselves in a very dangerous position. We're able to sit here and talk about this right now with relative impunity. But the net effect of this thing may eventually be that we can't say the things we've said today. Mm-hmm. You're quite right. This thing, not the disease, because there have been diseases. There's the flu, kills people every year. Some years it's worse. Some years it's way worse than this has been. But this time, our response to this thing has placed us in a situation where we have handed the future of our culture over to our government and their power-mad insanity. And we've done so because we allowed a bunch of people to make us afraid of being rational and learning what being alive for years and years and years has taught us. It's taught us that sometimes you get sick. Usually, the vast majority of people, when they get sick, they get better. We all know this. But this year, somehow, we have allowed ourselves to be convinced that this time when we get sick, we're all going to be dead. And that's not true. And if you continue to act like it is true, you're handing them your culture. You're handing them American civilization. I'm not going to do that. Now, you got to decide for yourself how scared you are. And you need to think very, very carefully about what is going to happen next time, because there's going to be a next time. They've already showed you what they're going to do to you next time. What are you going to do in response? Are you going to obey? You're going to roll over on your back? You're going to show them your belly? If you do, don't be surprised when they gut you. Stef Bradford, Dr. Stef Bradford's with us. Dr. Mueller's with us. Hope we've turned on a couple of lights for you here on Starting Strength Radio. Thank you guys for being with us. We'll see you next time.